This is the BIM practice group meeting, and this meeting is, I think, number 24 or 25 of the practice group. So we've been at this for just about 2 years now. I'm Roger Grant. I'm one of the co-leaders of the practice group along with Bob Wygant. Bob's not joining us today due to a previous commitment, so I'll be your leader today, and I'm also going to be the presenter. So but I do want to ask you all to help me out on that score and participate in the presentation today. At the moment, you're all muted to try to control background noise, but we encourage anyone that wants to speak to just raise your hand, and then we will unmute you so you can speak. I hope that everyone can see how to do that in your control panel there for GoToWebinar. It's pretty straightforward, although sometimes if you've called in on the phone and you didn't put in a PIN, then you may have to get one sent to you, and I guess that can be a little confusing sometimes. So if you do have a question or comment you want to make and you're not able to speak, you can also type it into the question box, and I will get to it. Or I'm also joined today by Rob Holson, who's helping with the webinar, and he'll help to communicate those questions. Rob, you're there?
Hello, everyone. Glad to have you join us.
Okay. Well, good then. Thanks all, and let's go ahead and get started. Our topic for today is to talk about open standards and interoperability, which is a topic that we have covered somewhat in the past. I wanted to kind of give a little bit of an update on what's going on a couple of fronts, and then I also wanted to get a little bit into how you might translate these open standards into something that you can use with an example of a project, a couple projects maybe that are going on that I think are approachable for us as individual practitioners when we want to figure out how to start to adopt standards in our work, and in particular open standards. And then at the end of the meeting, maybe if we have a little time, we'll talk about where we're going with future meetings. But a couple things we're thinking about. I think next month we'll go back to having a presentation from a vendor who is doing BIM work. I think kind of following on the presentation last month, which I heard was really interesting. Graphisoft, we're going to have Nemechek Vectorworks talk to us about their tools, and in particular how they deal with information and how they're looking at open interoperability as a strategy in their product line. After that, we're thinking about going into looking at some of these product modeling websites that are out there and what they're doing and how they work, and maybe talk a little bit about product data, how you might use it, how it's being formulated. There's a number of different options between Seek and ARCAT and Smart BIM from Reed, that amongst others. I'm not trying to be all-inclusive in this list, so I don't want to leave anybody out, but we're going to explore that a little bit and continue this discussion about information and how it plugs into models and specifications. So let's start this discussion about standards. Let's see here. Got a presentation. I'm going to use parts of a couple of presentations that I've used, and one that Deke Smith and I used at ASHRAE. Okay. Rob, can you see this okay? Because I don't really want to go to the full screen because I don't want to use the whole presentation. I want to be able to see what's coming. So is that visible okay, the
Certainly,
main slide?
I think so, absolutely. And I encourage anyone, if you can't really see it, let us know or raise your hand, and we'll try and make that a little bigger. But I think it's legible.
Okay. Well, one of the big challenges for us in the building industry, which we've certainly talked about before, is this idea that there's just a lot of content that we need to use, and it comes from a lot of different places. Some of those things are graphics, which have their own standards about how they're organized and put together. Data about products, which we talked about, is less standardized than graphical data, although there's some efforts out there to try to standardize it more, and we'll talk about one of those a little bit more later. Objects, which might be considered a couple of these other elements here that are organized together to represent something that has form, function, knows about its behavior. Systems or assemblies and materials are all the kinds of content which, this is pretty much obvious to us, but it really points to needing standards because this content comes from a lot of different places. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with standards, and this graphic I think kind of shows what we can do with this and why this is important. I don't know if you've maybe seen this before, but the idea is, we have this range of things that we want to represent, and to represent them digitally, we need to be able to exchange information about them in the computer. So doing all these things with computer-to-computer connections would be inefficient and difficult. So this really kind of shows, if we want to go from the broadest perspective, which we're doing with GIS now, you can certainly marvel at Google Earth, and part of the way that works is because there's standards underlying all those representations of location and imagery, down to being able within a structure to know something about its parts. And this ability to do this kind of entering here at any point is a real goal. One of the projects that we might reference a little bit is that the AECOO testbed, which Building Smart and the Oscar and GSA, amongst others, are involved in, is trying to get information for first responders that come out to a disaster and need to get into a building and know what's there and be able to do that in any jurisdiction. So that kind of activity certainly needs to have standardization to be effective. And this kind of just shows another reason why this is important to us in the building world. We got lots of different kind of information, and it changes. It comes from a lot of places. This graphic kind of represents that well. So I thought this was interesting. This came from one of my IFD colleagues from Norway, but they're very involved in the European Union, of course, and there's a Commission on Interoperable Delivery of European e-Government Services to public administrations, businesses, and citizens. They like to standardize things in the EU because they're going between lots of different countries and ways of organizing information. But this is worth pointing out. The aspects of interoperability identified as being in need of consideration by the European Interoperability Framework are organizational, semantic, and technical interoperability. So in our world, we have something called the Building Smart Standards, which I think most of you have some familiarity with, but maybe let's try a little poll here. Can you raise your hand if you're aware of Building Smart International and the Building Smart Standards? Just try that push your hand raise button. Rob, I'm going to let you give us a count on what the saturation level is.
Certainly, certainly. And I'll also let you know we had a good point raised by Deborah McPherson. She typed in that also the building standards need to work with emergency standards and geospatial standards.
That's a great point, and that's what that graphic is trying to show, that in order to really have that kind of complete interoperability, we need to have those connection points made and have standards to help us do it. It's the only way to really do it. So what do we got for knowledge of building smart standards here?
Well, I'm seeing 5 out of our 27 attendees.
All right. Well, that's interesting. I guess Building Smart has a little work to do. I know everyone intuitively knows about Building Smart because no one wants to be building any other way. But this is an effort, an international effort, to establish some standards, and it is functioning in in North America, but also across Europe and Asia. We'll go to their website in a minute, but I just want to put up one more slide here about interoperability. So beyond the ability for computers to exchange things, we've been able to pass files back and forth between computers for a long time, but having semantic interoperability, which is the ability for information to be interpreted automatically and accurately, is what really produces useful results. And that's what we're trying to get at with interoperability, to be able to have computers understand what they're exchanging without having to have all the connections hardwired. So this is what standards can do, and what in the EU they're looking to standards to do. As that other previous slide pointed out, organizational, semantic, and technical interoperability. In Building Smart, we're trying to achieve this by, if you think of these 3 types of interoperability, terminology, process, and digital storage, or as we said before, organizational, which would be digital storage, semantic, which is the terminology, and excuse me, I guess organizational would be process, and the technical would be the digital storage in this case. So this works in other industries, in oil and gas, and defense, and aeronautics, and space. Rob, are you hearing me okay?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Just
absolutely.
checking.
I'm sorry.
All
Yeah,
right. I'm
here.
getting some note from Citrix that it's telling me I'm having some problems. So if anyone's having a problem hearing us, please let us know.
So far, I haven't gotten any messages like that.
In the built environment, we're relying on the Building Smart International Standards to give us these 3 levels of interoperability. The IFD library, which we've talked about in this group a little bit, the main standard, the Industry Foundation Class IFC standard, and the IDM, or Process Model standard. Just to go on this a little further, the Building Smart standards are on this slide. IFC model, which is a model that represents relationships between objects, and it's based on an ISO standard 16739, I think. The IFD library, which is a terminology system, is based on ISO standard as well, and the process modeling or exchange requirements are based on an ISO standard. And these are all components of the Building Smart International suite of standards. And if you really want to get into this, you can go a little deeper by going to, and I had their website here. Let's see, the Building Smart International website at buildingsmart.com, I think it is. And I don't know what I did with it. I had too many things open here. Um, well, we will. That's not it either. I think I might put it on this one. No, sorry. um, buildingsmart.com is where you can find out more about the Building Smart standards. I do want to show you the website. Let's try this.
And Roger, I'll let you know I unmuted Michael White as well as he had a question.
Oh, yeah, if anybody wants to speak up and add something in, Deborah, I know you've got a lot of experience with this and you're on the phone, or Michael, please jump in. So this is the Building Smart website. And, just, you know, it's amazing.
Roger?
Yes.
Roger, hopefully you can hear me okay.
I can.
Okay, I didn't want to interrupt your presentation. I think that's good. One of the questions I had was, does Google Earth have features to add data to a model that you can place on Google Earth, like floating bubbles? You know how everyone's looking for a platform and you have all this industry foundation classes and all that stuff, and that's great. It almost seems like if we could all post our stuff to Google Earth, because that's where we're building our stuff, and then everybody can access it. So it would seem like all the vendors, I'm really just making this up here, but it seems like if everybody could export all their stuff so that anybody could view it on Google Earth, then that would be the platform that everybody could work off of, and because that's where we're building. I don't know, does that make sense?
It makes sense, and in fact, it can be done and is being done. You can place a model on Google Earth in a location at an address, and if you've ever seen or heard of, there's some events, they haven't run one for a while, but BIM Storm is what it's called, and what they do is take a map of a city and pose a problem and let people collaborate through, through sharing information using some different systems, but they present the space and the problem on Google Earth, and they post the results there of buildings that have been,
Can you store data?
I don't know how much data you can store. I don't know if anybody else knows about that. I don't know enough technically to say what data you can store. You can store something about the building, but I don't know how deep you can go. I think there's some connection between SketchUp models and Google Earth that facilitates storing a SketchUp model on a Google Earth grid.
Okay. So there's nothing really that would, like if you're doing a big campus and you had a whole code department, they would just start storing everything on the campus in Google Earth, because at first phase you just do massing models, and then they would, and as it got more developed, everyone would just be whatever vendor product they were using, whether they're using Vectorworks or AutoCAD or whatever, they would all at the end of the day or at the end of the week upload it to the Google model, and then everybody on the team is using the Google Earth as a place to hang out and store all the data.
Well, you can, organizations definitely put their, identify their assets on Google Earth. I don't know how, you probably can't just drill deeply into a model right out of that interface. You've got to have all the software connections and things going in the background, and I don't know what you're really storing up there. Maybe some information about the footprint, and you might be able to store an image.
Okay, yeah, it looks kind of basic for now, but
yeah, it is, and there's some call to, and there is work on standardizing that and on the connection between the geospatial standards and the building standards, which I mentioned a little bit in that project that the OGC and GSA and some other organizations worked on for first responders. So let me go on, but I appreciate that, Michael. So on the Building Smart website, you can get, and this is really worth it, I think, just spend a little time here and read about IFC and IDM and IFD, and that's a good place to get an overview of it from the Building Smart International website. So these are the international kind of high-level standards that people are working on to try to support interoperability. In North America, we're working on a national BIM standard, and this is it's out in version 1, and it's about to come out in version with a balloting. The process for balloting version 2 has been identified, and the work to create version 2 is about to get underway. I'm just going to flip over to this presentation that Deeka and I did at ASHRAE, because I thought this was an interesting perspective on how these standards kind of come together and relate to each other and drive the industry to collaborate on both setting the standards but then also following them. So we have in the building world the international standards, the Building Smart standards that we just looked at that are the top level standard, and those are all based on ISO standards as listed there. At the national level, we're working on developing the national BIM standard, and this you can get more information about at the Building Smart Alliance NIBS website, and it's going to be a collection of some standard structures for information as well as exchanges that have been established using open standards. So some examples of things that could get balloted through the standard that are probably close to getting balloted through the standard might be OmniClass. If we were to do this and run OmniClass through consensus process, that's something we're looking at. Some other things are COBE, Capital Operations Building Information Exchange Format, which is a way to take out of a model and send to the owner a standard set of information about what was in the building model when it was finished. There's a lot of work GSA has done, and that could become part of the national BIM standard, and I think there's interest on their part in doing that. And then there's some other organizations, AIA, OGC, ASHRAE, that are doing things. But the idea is that associations can then develop guidelines, which is really what CSI does through its formats and practice guidelines, but those could be compliant with and support the national standard. And the companies then can kind of pick up on that. So I think this is an interesting way to think about the standard process. The National BIM standard you can read about at the Building Smart Alliance website. And one of the things you can do there is joining the project committee. Well, you have to join Building Smart, I guess, to do that, which I think has a $75 fee associated with it, or a $100 fee, and then you can join the project committee, and then you can participate in the review and balloting of the standard, which you might only find certain parts of it to be of interest, but still a worthwhile thing to do if you're interested in incorporating some of this in some way in your own work. We need these foundational standards. Cell phones can talk to each other. We know how to read a digital image off of a DVD. Without email standards, we'd be in trouble. So I guess we all buy into this concept. We're just pushing it out to the building world and what we're trying to do. I think this we know about the BIM standard. This is kind of interesting. The GSA, the General Services Administration, in collaboration with Sonati Properties from Finland and Statsbygg from Norway, issued this statement of their intent to support open standards. And I think this is an important kind of thing, because these big owners are pushing this because they can see the value in collaborating in this way and not being dependent on their own internal systems or purely what the software they're using is doing, that the open standards are critical. Another organization that recently made an important statement about this was the AIA. I guess it's been close to a year ago now, that they believe that open standards, so this software must support non-proprietary open standards for auditable information exchange. So I think that's a critical piece. Some states have requirements. I don't know if any of you have run into this in any of your work, but the state of Wisconsin, the state of Texas, and Illinois is talking about this. Of course, I think the fiscal challenges states are facing might be having an effect on this, but in the end, this could help them to be more efficient. This just points out this idea of trying to work with the highest level standards, and that's what connecting to Building Smart and the National BIM standard does for us. All right.
Roger also had a quick question from Shane David, and he's wondering, is there a way to review the NBS version 1?
NBIM's version 1, yes, you can. I believe from the website you can get it. Let's see. I think it's on here. I just I don't think you National BIM standard. What's this? I think you can download it. There it is. Version 1.0. Version 1, Part 1. It's right there. You can download it and read through it, and I think that's a good thing to familiarize yourself with especially if you want to participate in version 2. It's really a framework at this point. There really aren't any exchanges validated in it yet, but a couple are getting ready to go. All right, so I think that's kind of all we want to cover on the National BIM standard. So I'm going to go back to my presentation, and I want to just touch on a couple things. We talked about that relationship between standards and guidelines, and so when you're using CSI's formats and practice guidelines, you're standardizing your efforts. And I think one critical development from CSI in the last year is the update and release of Uniformat and the accompanying PPD format. Now, this just shows how this. So Uniformat is what I want to talk about for a minute. Let's see, how many of you use Uniformat in any way today in your work, in your practice, in your work that you're doing, information that you're organizing, cost estimates, specifications? Anybody? Go ahead and do the hand raise if we've got any Uniformat users. How are we doing, Rob? How many do we have?
I'm seeing 6.
I guess it's a small number. 6 out of 30?
32, yep.
Okay, so, well, it's not overwhelming, but that's good. So anybody want to say what you're doing with it? Go ahead, speak up. Not too exhaustive, but
hi.
Uniformat is an elemental classification system, by the way. Go ahead.
This is Deb McPherson. We use Uniformat mainly to get from Revit to eSpecs. There's an assembly code that's part of eSpecs, and it both Revit and eSpecs, and it takes this 4-digit unit that's the regular Uniformat, and it adds on a 4th level. And sometimes, as soon as you get out of the normal standard, that's where sometimes we'll have problems with keynotes and things like that. And we'll always end up having to add some customized one. But that's generally where we use Uniformat the most. And then the cost estimators use Uniformat all the time.
Yeah. Well, and those, that's the software has it implemented, basically a version of Uniformat that allows, I guess it names the Revit objects or classifies the Revit objects, and then eSpecs can connect to that. And now they're using an older, non-standard version of Uniformat, which probably, for what they're doing with it isn't really a problem. But if you were interested in connecting to it, you'd have to do some sort of mapping. I think the goal, and I think Autodesk will do this, would be to update to the new version and embed it in their program, but it takes a little while to make that happen.
I think they do need to update because of the stairs, especially moving over, but I think Uniformat is probably going to be the best hope for getting from everything that touches the specs. You have the model, you have the costs, you have submittals, all these different things that sometimes Uniformat's in the right size chunks. That's a little more suited for that.
Yeah, Uniformat lines up well with the functional parts of a building, which really coordinate with the objects in a model. So from a modeling standpoint, I think it's the best way to classify the different objects or functional parts of a building. So I think that's a good observation. I think it's going to continue to gain in usage. And another thing that I think is important that CSI just released is something called PPD format. Anybody use PPD to structure their specifications for projects? Let's have another poll. Anybody? Okay, so while we're taking the poll, PPD, preliminary project description format, is in the same way that section format structures the writing of specifications that are organized using master format, work results view, which I'm going to assume you're all familiar with. PPD format is the corresponding way to structure something called a preliminary project description, which when we start to consider integrated delivery and the capabilities that BIM gives us to accelerate the way that we need to define our projects so they can be controlled, I think that the PPD is going to also gain a usage. I guess, did we get anybody using it, Rob?
Yeah, I do see two hands raised, but I'll let you know also that your volume got low all of a sudden. So I don't know if you can turn it up or maybe get closer to the mic. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Oh, I'm a little worried about my connection, but is that better?
That is a little better, yes.
Okay. Well, I will. I don't know if I'll speak up. Okay, so PPD format, I think, is something that's going to be useful, and it's a way that you can standardize, your approach to writing these project descriptions, which correspond to the concept submittal for a model. And I know if you're doing any work for the GSA, they're in the process of developing a new part of their BIM guide series for elements, and it's going to give instructions on how to organize a model to have a consistent set of elements and describe those. And it's going to be referencing Uniformat and another implementation of PPD of Uniformat and another one of the OmniClass product tables is that the GSA is involved in. I want to talk a minute about, but let me make sure. I'm just going to go on one more slide or two here before I do that. All right, so that I think was worth a little discussion about PPD and Uniformat. But now I want to go on to, I'm not going to talk about this section format, although there are ways to organize things. I want to kind of get on to OmniClass for a minute because I think when we look at the trying to start organizing and structuring information for in our own practices, this is the way. Can you hear me okay, Rob?
Yeah, I was going to say, could you speak up again? You've dropped
really
for some reason. Yeah, that's better now, though.
All right, this is a way that you can really approach this use of an open standard. And OmniClass is a completely open standard. You can get all of these information from these tables off of the OmniClass website at omniclass.org. You can download them as PDFs there, or you can request that you receive them as Excel files that you can implement. And so, one of the critical things that OmniClass lets you do, which I want to use this slide to illustrate, is now I got to put this in presentation mode for a minute. So you've got a model, which here's a facility, and it's made up of a lot of different objects that are inside of it, and an object-oriented model doesn't have the kind. I mean, you can extract things alphabetically out of it. You can extract the objects, but in and of itself, it doesn't have an organization that puts information together that coordinates with any of our other reporting formats or ways of accessing related information. So what OmniClass does is you can, if you have, say, this view of this model, we're looking at all of the doors. So we can certainly find those in the model, but if we've also tagged them with a couple of different OmniClass table entries, we could find related information about them in other places. So one example for something like a door would be adding the classification from the products table. Now, you could add other classifications. You can probably go a lot further with this than most people are going to, but a few of the classifications like work results and maybe elements and products could be really helpful for some object like a product. So what OmniClass really does is give us a way to organize what's in the BIM for communication. And an example of that I wanted to share with you is some work that the GSA is doing. In fact, the OmniClass products table, ignore that IFD library thing for a minute, am I doing okay on the volume, Rob?
Yeah, the volume's doing well. I'm glad you paused, though. We do have a couple hands raised.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Let them speak. I'm showing you the OmniClass products table in a spreadsheet view, and I want to show how someone has actually used this in a real project. But please, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, do so.
Yeah, everyone with their hands raised or with questions open should be unmuted at this point.
Yes. You have the floor.
John O'Neill, Mike McVitie, I see both your hands raised. Did you have any questions?
I did not.
Oh, okay.
Oh. Okay, well, let me go on, and if anybody wants to jump in, please do so. So this is table 23, the products table. This was extensively revised in the latest release of OmniClass. And it was actually done in large part by a committee that consisted of GSA representation and people from VA, Veterans Administration, State Department, and DHS, Coast Guard, participated, and along with some other individuals and members of companies. So this resulted in the newly revised products table, which was greatly expanded. And what GSA wanted to do with this, the reason they're particularly interested, is they are wanting to define all of the products particularly the equipment in their facilities. Actually, GSA, VA, those organizations are all in the process of implementing Maximo, a CMMS system, and they want to have a consistent way to name their products. So they participated in the development of Table 23 because they want to rely on an open standard. They don't want to maintain this. They want to let industry do it. But they took it, and this tab is going to show you what they did. I hope you can see this. It's a little confusing, I admit, when you see it at first. But they basically took all the categories in the table and made them, and in a classification system, you're talking about classes that include individual items, and so they're generally plural. An object is generally defined as a singular thing. So in this case, they converted all the class names to singular names, so they had a reference. And they then attached some information, which was important to them, which was an abbreviation, because this is going to be tagged to equipment in the field, and they used the National CAD standard as a starting point, but that wasn't always sufficient, so they also had to source some things from ASME and other organizations to try to come up with a final set of abbreviations, which will then go back to the NCS to be included in their list at a future balloting of the NCS. So in this column here, the final abbreviation was associated. Here's the Omni-class number, and then here's the singular name of that object, which they're going to use to name these objects. And the other standard they went out and sourced was something called the UNSPSC, the UN Product System Key Code. I don't know exactly. It's a UN system for defining all kinds of products. And you go in there, you can find a lot of construction codes, and these get used quite a bit in purchasing systems. So,
Roger, you got quiet. I can barely hear you.
The UNSPSC code was attached to these. Is that better, Rob?
You're still kind of fading in and out.
Really?
Speak up, and I guess we'll do the best.
Sorry about that. I can't speak up much more. So it's probably an internet.
Yeah, it must be. I see everyone else is muted, so you're the only one speaking right now.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Yeah, I don't know. Well, is that any better?
It sounds a little clearer, not much louder, but a little clearer anyway. Are you there still?
Rob?
Yep.
All right, you can hear me okay, right? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. There may be a little lag.
I'm going to soldier on here. So this is the data that they took an Omni-class table and prepared, and what they are actually doing with it is this. Because in the field, they want to tag every piece of equipment with a standard tag so it can be found, so it can be associated with their maintenance management system. And because of the way they're doing it, it can also ultimately be associated with an element in a building information model. They're giving an equipment type nomenclature using the product table, and they're attaching a system nomenclature to it using the elements table Uniformat. And they intend to use the new version of Uniformat to do this. And so I think this is an interesting way that an organization, admittedly, a group of large organizations, but has used an open standard to structure what they're doing. And once this is in place, it allows a lot of things to connect to it and build on it. And I think this is a good illustration of how you can take these sort of abstract Omni-class tables and apply them and actually get some value out of it. Sorry about that. I think the extent to which you use OmniClass to make those multiple kinds of connections, as I mentioned, you use a lot of tables that could become somewhat complicated. So I think a future development that CSI is working on along with some other organizations is this other building smart standard called the IFD library. And what it really does is allow you to take the objects and associate all kinds of things with them and keep track of it in an open environment. So you can associate multiple classifications with an object, or multiple languages or standards, et cetera, et cetera. It's really about identifying things in a way that you can reuse. So the word beam, for example, can mean a lot of things. As you saw from my screensaver, my favorite meaning has to do with a beam reach, but in the building industry, we're talking about beams upon which we build our floor systems, for example. So it lets you really do is set up generic names, generic classes of information with which you can populate specific instances. So this is coming. It's not quite there yet, although we're getting closer all the time. I'm working on, with our terminology project, we are really on the verge of introducing content from North America to IFD, and we're working on the tools that make that a standardized process, and the processes that software companies, who will probably be the biggest users of this, can use to connect their AEC applications. And so we've got a couple of projects that we're trying to get started to illustrate the implementation of IFD along with some of the other building smart standards like IFC, which has been implemented much more extensively. That actually the latest release of IFC model 2x4 will accommodate has a connection point built into IFD, and the value is that the objects can have additional property classes associated with them relatively easily that way, that go beyond the properties classes that are already defined in the IFC model. So that probably sounds a little bit like techno-babble, but that's the concept, and it's something that is gaining hold and will continue to, I think, provide a useful way for standards to get further implemented to help us with this challenge of managing all kinds of information and connecting it to applications. All right, Rob, we got any questions out there? Or?
Well, I was just about to say it's not a question, but Michael White had a comment on something on the tag you mentioned earlier. He was saying that tag should get attached to the modeling software.
Right. What the IFD does is generate a GUID, a global unique identifier, that can be tagged to an object in a model, and then that GUID can be referenced in all kinds of other places because that the term, the subject, the property, the classification, the standard has a definition associated with it. So once someone tries to connect to that, they make the decision that it is truly what they want to connect to, and that is what gets us towards that semantic interoperability that we were talking about. So what I'm trying to advocate for, though, is I know we talk about these standards, and they're always a little bit abstract. I mean, it takes a while to figure out how this stuff works, and a lot of it doesn't even really work yet. It's just in the process. I mean, it has to go through some development for quite a period of time before it becomes really valuable. But once it gets to that level, it really gets a lot of leverage. But what I wanted, by showing you that IFACT and NEST work from GSA and the other agencies, I think you can see how you can pick up an OmniClass table and use it in your own organization to structure the information you have to deal with. You know, get it as an Excel table, use it to set up, use the names of classes to set up the names of things that you want to organize data about, and you have implemented an open standard in your practice, which, well, an open guideline. We can't quite call OmniClass a standard yet, but we may, as we, if we do go through the balloting process, either through Building Smart or on our own, be able to call it a standard. But that's probably an academic point for many of us right now. Anyone, is anyone out there trying to do this in any way using an OmniClass table? Is anyone there that's on the call today using an OmniClass table in their practice in some way that you'd want to share with us now, and maybe even consider showing us on a future meeting? We could take some time out to do that. Anybody?
Hey, Robert?
Yeah,
Robert?
it's Roger, but...
Roger,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Roger. Yeah, I sent a PDF to you like a while ago with like just very basic stuff showing an isometric view of a concrete pillar with a rebar.
Oh, Michael, right? This is Michael White?
Yeah, and
yes.
I've got the book printed out, and I think it's great, but I don't know if I'm using it wrong, but when I look at, like, I'm going to label every object so I can then sort it later, I choke on just like rebar, or maybe that's too small, or, you know, I have no idea what I'm doing with it because it seems like bits and pieces are found in every category. You know, so like just plain rebar, what's that under? And, you know, just simple things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in a future episode we could just do that PDF.
Yeah, I've had that. I've tried to encourage Bob, who's our Robert Wygant, to take that on. We haven't quite gotten to it, but we haven't lost that idea to take some kind of we were going to look at, actually, he's got a simple model in his Revit that he's built of a schoolhouse, and we were going to take a couple of the objects at different layers, at different levels of detail out of that model, and show how classification attaches to them or could attach to them. And I think, you know, I don't know the complete answer. One of the things I think we lack with OmniClass is any kind of an application guide that tells you how to, you know, what is the most effective way to use this. I would say that that's some problem we're trying to address. I'm trying to launch, and I've got some support from some of the vendors at this point, something called an OmniClass Technology Sponsor Group. And the idea is to get some implementation discussion going by the organizations that are trying to use OmniClass to do this classification of information in a BIM, so we can share some practices and start to capture some of this for everybody else to use. So that is just getting going. It has a place for organizations like Autodesk, but I also envision it having a place for practitioners, firms, and you know, I'd like to encourage any of you that might be interested in that to send me a note about it, and I'd be happy to give you some more information. We're just trying to get that going. We're going to try to have an organizing meeting during the Building Smart meetings in Washington in December. But Michael, I think your idea is great, and I want to try to take that on. We just haven't, for some reason, quite gotten to it yet.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere.
Well, this is, you know, this stuff moves, some people think at a glacial pace, but when you look back, progress keeps getting made. I think it's amazing, all the progress that came out of the recent release of OmniClass. There's a lot of work done on the tables, and some of them are really getting to be in pretty good shape, like that products table, and certainly Elements. Well, Elements hasn't been re-released yet but it will be based on Uniformat.
Also,
Well, we're
Roger, I would
close
just
to running out of time. I kind of bounced around a lot today. I just wanted to kind of talk about what's going on with standards and continue to make the case for why they're important and maybe show you how they could start to become approachable to you in your practice. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to comment about how they're using, just say, OmniClass in their? Or now, many of you are probably, we're doing things at the level of using master format and section format, and maybe uniformat. Deb mentioned that in her firm, or at least with between Revit and eSpecs. So
Yep, Roger. Roger, I was going to say, Mike McVitie actually wrote in and was saying that they're using OmniClass to reorganize the browser in Revit, or organize the browser in Revit.
Oh, good. Okay, and I guess that is worth acknowledging that if you go to the Seek website, Autodesk Seek, you can see how they're using OmniClass. You can sort information. They give you multiple ways to view their content, and one of them is using the OmniClass products table. So there's an implementation of OmniClass that is interesting, and it would, as we get that product view implemented on a lot of other databases, that'll facilitate finding related information in specs, in models, and in product data.
And also, we had one other question from Russell Wooten, who was saying that he was asking, isn't the OmniClass just table 23 just master format with a 23 prefix? And I think it's close, but wouldn't that be closer to 22, which is work results?
OmniClass, yeah, table 22 is work results table, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah,
21 is 22 is work results, 23 is products. So table 22 is master format without some of the overhead items. It's just the work results items, and it has a 22 appended to it. 23 is the products table, and it is actually considerably different than master format. Although there is a map, I believe, to master format categories that has been put together, but it is a products view. We often have used master format as a way to organize information about products because products typically get used in work results, but it really isn't a product structure. And I guess that would be an interesting thing to take on, would be to try to illustrate. Maybe we'll do that at one of our next meetings, the difference between the products table and master format. I think that would be interesting. All right, well, I think we've run out of time, so I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We have to pin down the November meeting. I suspect it's going to be on the 19th. I think the 12th, in fact, I'm almost positive it will be on the 19th. So I believe that is the Friday, the third Friday in November. And then December will be the 17th. We'll get information out about those. We'll continue these themes. Next month, I think we'll be talking to Vectorworks about what they're doing, and maybe we'll try to squeeze in this point about the products table and master format. And then we'll delve a little more deeply into this whole products world, I think, and what's out there. So thank you. Questions, thoughts, comments, ideas, you can send to Bob, myself, or Rob. Here's some resources that you might find, although I guess the wiki and the blog are being redone, so you may not find those at the moment. But anyway, thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Great. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
This will end the webinar, I guess, right?